A prison where the inmate was richer than the guards. A prison with a private nightclub, a casino, a waterfall, and a soccer field. A place where the most dangerous man on earth lived like a king behind bars. This was not a fortress designed to contain Pablo Escobar. It was a palace designed to protect him. A sanctuary he called La Catedral. But behind its high walls and rolling green hills lay a secret so shocking, it would lead to betrayal, blood, and the collapse of Escobar's empire. This is the untold story of Pablo Escobar's luxury prison. Early life. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born in December 1949, in Rio Negro, Colombia, and raised in the small town of Envigado. The son of a poor farmer and a schoolteacher, Pablo grew up surrounded by poverty, but also by ambition. His friends recall a boy who never wanted to be ordinary. By the age of 16, he was selling stolen tombstones, running street scams, and smuggling stolen electronics. Locals called him fearless, even charming. But beneath that charm was a hunger for power, money, and immortality. Escobar once told a classmate, "I'll be a millionaire by 30, or I'll be dead." He wasn't lying. Rise to fame. In the 1970s, cocaine was exploding across the United States. And Escobar saw opportunity. He partnered with local smugglers and built routes into Miami, flooding America with powder that glittered like gold. By the early 1980s, Escobar was not just rich, he was the richest. He controlled 80% of the world's cocaine trade. Every month, his cartel smuggled 70 to 80 tons of cocaine into the U.S. The profits were staggering. Escobar's Medellín cartel raked in an estimated $420 million a week. He became one of the wealthiest men on earth. But Pablo Escobar was not just a drug lord. He was a Robin Hood figure to the poor. He built housing projects, schools, and soccer fields in Medellín. For some, he was a savior. For others, he was a terrorist. Career highlights. Escobar's empire was larger than any cartel before or since. He owned private jets, lavish mansions, fleets of cars, and even his own zoo with elephants, giraffes, and hippos. At his peak, Forbes listed him as the 7th richest man in the world. But wealth could not buy him peace. The Colombian government, pressured by the United States, was desperate to take him down. Extradition to the U.S. was Escobar's greatest fear. He once said, "I'd rather have a grave in Colombia than a cell in the United States." And so, Escobar made a deal. In 1991, to avoid extradition, Escobar agreed to surrender to Colombian authorities, but only under one condition. He would build his own prison. And they agreed. The luxury prison, La Catedral, was no ordinary prison. Built high in the mountains overlooking Medellín, it was more fortress than penitentiary. Escobar personally chose the location, far from rival cartels, with panoramic views of the valley below. On paper, it was a maximum security facility. In reality, it was a private resort. Inside La Catedral, Escobar had a bar stocked with the finest liquors, a nightclub with flashing lights and music, a casino for late-night gambling, a waterfall and life-sized dollhouse for his daughter, even a full-sized soccer field where professional players, including members of Colombia's national team, came to play matches with him. He was guarded not by Colombian police, but by his own men, handpicked to ensure loyalty. His family visited freely. Politicians, celebrities, and mistresses walked in and out without consequence. For Pablo, prison was simply a new palace. The locals called it Hotel Escobar. But beneath the luxury, something darker was happening. Because La Catedral was not just a playground, it was a command center. Escobar continued to run his cartel from behind its walls, giving orders, authorizing hits, and controlling billions. The prison that was meant to cage him only protected him. Controversies. At first, the Colombian government pretended not to notice. They had neutralized Escobar, at least publicly. But cracks in the facade soon appeared. Rivals who betrayed Escobar were summoned to La Catedral, and never returned. The prison became a killing ground. It was said that screams echoed from its walls, hidden beneath the music of Escobar's private parties. The breaking point came in 1992, when Escobar tortured and murdered 2 of his lieutenants inside the prison. News leaked. The illusion collapsed. International outrage followed. The Colombian government realized they could no longer ignore the monster they had created. They planned to move Escobar to a real prison. But Pablo Escobar was always one step ahead. On July 22, 1992, government forces surrounded La Catedral. But when they stormed the prison, Escobar was gone. He had slipped through a secret exit in the mountain. The king had vanished. Personal side. Despite his brutality, Escobar's personal life was complicated. He adored his wife, Maria Victoria, and his 2 children. Inside La Catedral, his family lived in comfort. His daughter's birthday was celebrated with clowns, cakes, and fireworks, all inside the prison walls. Escobar was also obsessed with image. He posed for photos in front of his zoo, played soccer with neighborhood kids, and gave out stacks of cash to the poor. To his enemies, he was a ruthless killer. To his family and the poor of Medellín, he was still, Don Pablo, a protector. It was this duality, the family man and the mass murderer, that made him one of the most fascinating criminals in history. Legacy. La Catedral became a symbol of corruption, a reminder of how one man's power could bend an entire nation. After Escobar's escape, Colombia plunged into chaos. Bombings, assassinations, and terror spread across the country. Thousands died in his war against the government. When Escobar was finally killed in 1993 on a Medellín rooftop, La Catedral stood abandoned. Its walls became a monument to a time when the world's richest criminal ruled not just the streets, but even his own prison. Today, La Catedral has been converted into a monastery, where monks pray on the very ground that once echoed with gunshots and screams. But the shadows of Escobar's reign still linger. Where they are now, Escobar's death ended one chapter, but his legend never died. Movies, series, and books continue to portray him as both a monster and a myth. His story warns us of what happens when power goes unchecked, when corruption infects justice, and when a man believes he is greater than the law itself. And La Catedral remains the most bizarre prison in history. A place where the prisoner was king, and the guards were his servants. A place that showed the world that even behind bars, Pablo Escobar was untouchable. At least, for a while. Pablo Escobar's story is not just about drugs or money. It's about power, corruption, and the dangerous illusion of control. So we leave you with this question. If a man like Escobar could build a palace disguised as a prison, could it ever happen again? Tell us in the comments, would today's governments ever allow such a deal? Or is La Catedral a nightmare that belongs only to the past? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more untold prison stories, here on Prison Chronicles.